What if I told you that the biggest medical scam in history was actually hiding one of the most powerful superfoods the world has ever known? That the same thing we've all laughed at, ridiculed, and dismissed as a symbol of fraud might actually be the missing key to fighting inflammation, heart disease, even depression. For over 100 years, the words snake oil have meant one thing: lies, scams, empty promises. But here's the shocking twist. Real snake oil was never the fraud. In fact, it holds a nutritional secret so potent that modern science can no longer ignore it. And the irony. While true snake oil got buried under ridicule, today's legitimate pharmaceutical industry may be selling us snake oil 20 on a global scale. Welcome to the Nutrition Institute. In this video, I'm pulling back the curtain on a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about medicine, superfoods, and the truth behind the label snake oil. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll never look at health the same way again. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support this channel so we can keep bringing you eye-opening insights like this one. When most people hear the phrase snake oil, they roll their eyes. It's practically shorthand for fraud, for con artists, for miracle cures that never worked. The phrase itself has survived over a century as a punchline. If someone's peddling snake oil, you know they're a scammer. I used to think the same way, but then I discovered something that turned this belief completely upside down. Real snake oil is not a scam at all. In fact, it may be one of the most overlooked superfoods in the entire world, and the story of how it went from trusted remedy to cultural joke says a lot about how easily truth can be buried under stigma. Let's rewind to the late 1800s. America was booming with railroads, and thousands of Chinese immigrants were working grueling hours laying track across the country. These men suffered terrible pain-aching joints, inflamed muscles, arthritis from relentless labor, but they had brought something with them from China: snake oil. Specifically, oil extracted from the Chinese water snake, a species rich in a special type of omega-3 fatty acid known as EPA. For them, snake oil wasn't a scam. It was relief. They rubbed it into their aching limbs, and it worked. It calmed inflammation, reduced swelling, and eased their pain. At the same time, though, a very different story was unfolding. In America, opportunists saw snake oil as a business opportunity. One of the most infamous was Clark Stanley, the so-called Rattlesnake King. He sold bottles of snake oil at fairs and gatherings, promising it would cure arthritis, digestive issues, and just about every ailment under the sun. But when the government finally tested his product, they discovered the truth. Not a single drop of snake oil inside, just a mix of mineral oil, beef fat, and a few herbs. He was fined $20, barely a slap on the wrist, even back then. But the damage was done. From that moment forward, snake oil became synonymous with fraud. The irony: real snake oil, the kind the Chinese workers used, was nothing like Stanley's fake concoction. It was potent, therapeutic, and effective. But the reputation had been poisoned. By the early 1900s, the new pharmaceutical industry was rising fast, and natural remedies were pushed to the sidelines. Anything branded snake oil was ridiculed, whether it worked or not. And here's where I stop and ask myself, how many other natural remedies have we dismissed, not because they didn't work, but because someone branded them as scams? How many treasures of traditional medicine have been lost in the noise of marketing wars and industry competition? The snake oil story perfectly captures that tension. On one hand, you had authentic traditional medicine being used effectively for generations. On the other, you had opportunists exploiting the name for profit. The tragedy is that the fraud defined the narrative, while the truth was forgotten. And this is what fascinates me most. the way history can erase reality simply by repeating a lie loud enough. Think about it. When you hear snake oil, your brain automatically jumps to worthless. You don't think of omega-3s or anti-inflammatory power or a natural remedy brought across the ocean by immigrants who knew its value. You think of a charlatan waving a bottle on a stage. That's the image we've been taught to hold on to. And that's why the real story shocked me so deeply. Because once you strip away the myth, snake oil is actually one of the richest natural sources of EPA, a powerful omega-3 that does things most people only associate with expensive supplements or prescription drugs. We'll get into the science later. But here's the point. Snake oil had real value. It wasn't fake medicine. It wasn't a placebo. It was simply branded into oblivion. This realization made me rethink more than just snake oil. It made me question the way we, as a society, decide what counts as legitimate medicine and what gets dismissed as quackery. Too often, the judgment has less to do with science and more to do with reputation, marketing, or power struggles between industries. Snake oil's fall from grace wasn't about its chemistry. It was about bad actors and a shifting cultural tide that elevated pharmaceuticals while discrediting natural remedies. And if I'm being honest, that makes me a little angry. Imagine the relief countless people could have found if snake oil hadn't been thrown out with the fraudsters. Imagine the decades of stigma that stopped researchers from even considering it. It's almost comical. The very thing we use as the universal metaphor for scams might actually be the opposite. That's why I say the snake oil story isn't just about a forgotten superfood. It's about how easy it is to lose sight of truth when perception takes over. It's about how a single dishonest salesman can overshadow an entire tradition of healing. And it's about how dangerous it can be to let cultural narratives replace scientific curiosity. For me, learning this history was like a wake-up call. It made me more skeptical, not of natural remedies, but of the labels we attach to them. Just because something has been mocked for 100 years doesn't mean it's worthless. Sometimes the mockery is the very reason we should look closer. Snake oil, in the truest sense, is not a scam. It's a mirror showing us how easily we can be manipulated into believing a story that hides a deeper truth. And that, to me, is the real lesson here. The more I learned about the history of snake oil, the more I realized that the story doesn't end in the 1800s. In fact, when I look around at the health industry today, I can't help but feel like we're still living in the shadow of the same trick, only now it's bigger, shinier, and fully legalized. Back then, it was Clark Stanley with his phony bottles of oil. Today, it's multi-billion-dollar corporations with glossy ads, lab coats, and FDA approval. But strip away the branding, and the pattern feels eerily familiar. Think about how snake oil became a joke in the first place. It wasn't because the real oil was useless. It was because fraudsters faked it, made wild promises, and sold lies. Now fast forward to modern times. How many drugs have been marketed as safe, revolutionary, even life-saving, only to later be pulled from the shelves because they turned out to be harmful? One of the most striking examples is Vioxx. When it first hit the market, it was hailed as a breakthrough for arthritis pain. Doctors prescribed it to millions of people. The company made billions in profit. But then the truth came out. Vioxx significantly increased the risk of heart attacks and strokes. By the time it was withdrawn, it's estimated that around 60,000 people had died because of it. 60,000 lives. That's not an exaggeration. It's a public health catastrophe. And yet, the corporation walked away after paying settlements, while the reputation of modern medicine remained intact. Compare that to snake Oil an entire tradition discredited because of a few shady salesmen, and tell me which scandal is worse. Another example that hits close to home for me is antidepressants, specifically Saceris. For decades, we've been told that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, usually framed as low serotonin. That explanation became the foundation for prescribing Saceris to millions of people. The problem? That chemical imbalance theory was never scientifically proven. Researchers have openly admitted it's not true, but the drugs were already deeply entrenched and billions of dollars were being made. What's more, when you dig into the numbers, Saceris barely outperform placebos, and yet they come with serious side effects, from emotional numbing to withdrawal symptoms to increased suicide risk in some patients. If that's not modern day snake oil, I don't know what is. And it's not just about individual drugs. It's about the way the system is structured. The pharmaceutical industry has an extraordinary amount of influence over what gets studied, what gets approved, and what gets marketed to the public. Clinical trials are often funded by the very companies that stand to profit from them. Negative results can be buried or spun. Panels that make decisions about safety and approval often include experts with financial ties to the drug makers. When money drives the science, can we really trust the outcomes? The most unsettling part for me is how diseases themselves seem to be multiplying, not because our biology is changing that rapidly, but because new conditions keep being defined and classified. At the turn of the 20th century, there were only a couple hundred recognized medical diagnoses. Today, there are more than 17,000, of course. Some of that reflects real advances in understanding human health, but some of it feels manufactured. Like every new disorder is another market to be tapped. Normal human experiences, sadness, shyness, forgetfulness get pathologized, then treated with pills. It's hard not to see that as another form of snake oil, selling solutions to problems we didn't even know we had until someone told us. Take insulin, for example. It's a life-saving medication for people with diabetes, but in the United States, the price has skyrocketed to the point where many patients struggle to afford it, while in other countries, it's sold for a fraction of the cost. The drug itself hasn't changed. What changed is the financial manipulation, the patents, and the protection of profits. Doesn't that echo the old snake oil salesman who cared more about the money than the people buying the bottle? Only now, the stakes are higher, and the system is rigged to protect the sellers. What really drives the comparison home for me is how the phrase snake oil got twisted. Back then, natural remedies, whether legitimate or not, were mocked as snake oil, while pharmaceutical drugs were presented as the future. Today, even researched natural treatments often get dismissed as quackery, while drugs with questionable evidence are given the stamp of authority. It's as if the narrative has flipped completely upside down. The frauds have been legitimized, while the real remedies are left in the shadows. And here's the bitter irony. When Big Pharma does stumble upon something that truly works in nature, they often try to patent it, modify it just enough to claim ownership, and sell it back to us at a premium. Snake oil's EP content, for instance, has been studied for its powerful anti-inflammatory effects, but you can't patent a natural substance. So companies tweak it, repackage it, and suddenly it's $1 billion drug. Meanwhile, the original source remains mocked as folk medicine. I want to be clear, I'm not saying all modern medicine is bad or that every pharmaceutical is snake oil. Countless lives have been saved by advances in science and medicine, but what troubles me is the lack of transparency, the corruption, and the profit-driven motives that echo the same behavior we once condemned in carnival barkers and traveling salesmen. Only now, the sales pitch comes with peer reviewed studies, celebrity endorsements, and government approval. So when I hear people laugh about snake oil, I can't help but wonder if we really think snake oil is the ultimate symbol of medical fraud. Shouldn't we also look closely at the scandals, the lawsuits, and the half-truths of our current system? Because in some ways, what we're dealing with now makes Clark Stanley look like an amateur. In the end, the snake oil metaphor isn't just a story from the past. It's a mirror held up to the present. It challenges us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who benefits from the cures we're sold? Who decides what counts as legitimate treatment? And how often are we buying into promises that don't live up to the hype? For me, the takeaway is clear. Fraud didn't disappear with the snake oil salesman. It just evolved. It got bigger, more sophisticated, and more deeply embedded in the very institutions we're supposed to trust. And that realization leaves me with one haunting thought. Maybe snake oil never really went away. Maybe it just put on a white coat. After digging into the history of snake oil and uncovering the dark parallels with modern medicine, I found myself asking, what about the real snake oil? The genuine remedy, not the fake bottles sold by hucksters. What does it actually do for the body? That's when I stumbled upon research that surprised me even more than the history itself. Because, as it turns out, real snake oil may be one of the most powerful natural sources of healing we've been ignoring for over a century. The secret lies in a fatty acid called EPA, short for eicosapentinoic acid. You've probably heard of omega-3 fatty acids before most people know them from fish oil or salmon. But here's the twist. Snake oil contains even higher levels of EPA than those well-known sources. And this isn't just some minor nutrient. EPA is a game changer. It doesn't work like a drug where the focus is on blocking or suppressing a single pathway. Instead, it shifts the body's entire inflammatory environment, tilting it away from constant fire and towards balance and healing. Think about inflammation for a moment. On the surface, it sounds bad: swelling, redness, pain. But inflammation is also the body's natural defense system. The problem comes when it never shuts off, when the alarm bell keeps ringing long after the fire is out. Chronic inflammation is at the root of so many diseases: arthritis, autoimmune disorders, heart disease, even certain cancers. And this is where EPA shines. It helps the body switch off that endless alarm, replacing destructive, pro-inflammatory signals with calming, anti-inflammatory ones. One of the most fascinating discoveries about EPA is its effect on mental health. Research has shown that higher EPA intake can reduce symptoms of depression, acting almost like a natural antidepressant. Unlike synthetic drugs, though, EPA doesn't come with a laundry list of side effects or the risk of chemical dependence. It simply works with the brain's chemistry in a supportive, balancing way. For me, that was eye-opening. How many people struggling with mood disorders could potentially find relief in a natural compound we've been ignoring? Then there's the heart. Cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer worldwide, and inflammation plays a huge role in damaging arteries and triggering heart attacks. Studies have found that EPA can reduce the risk of major heart events by up to 25%. That's not a small number, it's life-changing. Imagine if more people had access to this kind of preventive support. How many lives could be extended? How much suffering could be avoided? But it doesn't stop there. EPA has been linked to improved insulin sensitivity, which means it helps the body regulate blood sugar more effectively. For people with diabetes or those at risk of developing it, this is huge. Better insulin sensitivity reduces the strain on the pancreas and lowers the risk of complications. To put it plainly, snake oil could support millions of people struggling with blood sugar issues. And yet, hardly anyone talks about it. Another remarkable area is fibrosis, the buildup of scar tissue in organs like the liver, heart, or even brain. Chronic inflammation often leads to fibrosis, which then disrupts how those organs function. EPA has been shown to reduce fibrosis, helping tissues heal without the excessive scarring that causes long-term damage. That's not just useful for liver disease or heart failure patients, it's potentially transformative for anyone dealing with chronic injury or inflammation. And here's something that really caught my attention: EPA's role in immune regulation. Autoimmune diseases happen when the immune system misfires and attacks the body's own tissues. Instead of calming down after fighting off a threat, the system stays stuck in attack mode. EPA seems to help restore balance, dialing back the overreaction and reducing the damage. That could mean real hope for people living with conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, or multiple sclerosis diseases that modern medicine often manages with heavy-duty drugs carrying harsh side effects. Even cancer research has found hints that EPA may help by strengthening the immune system's ability to regulate abnormal cell growth. I'm not saying snake oil is a magic cancer cure. That's far too simplistic. But the idea that a natural substance could play a supportive role in prevention or treatment is worth paying attention to, especially when it works by guiding the body back toward balance rather than forcing it down one rigid path. What makes all this even more intriguing is that snake oil isn't limited to oral use. Traditionally, it was applied topically, rubbed directly into joints or sore muscles, and modern studies suggest there's truth to that too. EPA's anti-inflammatory effects can work locally, meaning snake oil might ease arthritis pain simply by being massaged into the skin. That's a level of versatility we don't see very often. Now, here's where the irony really stings. Pharmaceutical companies saw the potential of EPA years ago. They tried to patent it, but, of course, you can't patent a natural substance. So what did they do? They created modified versions, branded them as drugs, and sold them at high prices. In other words, the same industry that natural snake oil as a joke quietly built billion-dollar products around its core ingredient. That's not just ironic, it's maddening. For me, the bigger question is, why aren't we talking about this more? Why has snake oil been buried under ridicule while the science supporting its benefits sits in the background? I think it comes back to the power of narrative. Once something is branded a fraud, it's hard to shake that image, no matter what the evidence says. And yet, the evidence is there. EPA works. Snake oil, in its true form, works. So, here's the conclusion I've come to. Snake oil is not the fraud we've been told it is. The fraud was the people who faked it, who sold lies in a bottle. The real snake oil, the one used by workers, validated by science, is a forgotten nutritional treasure. And maybe, just maybe, the reason it's been ignored is because it challenges the dominance of a system that profits more from patented drugs than from natural solutions. The story of snake oil should make us rethink not just this one remedy, but the way we judge all natural medicine. It should remind us that sometimes the truth hides under a mountain of stigma, waiting for us to dig it back up. And it should push us to ask if snake oil, the ultimate symbol of quackery, actually holds real healing power. What else have we been dismissing too quickly? When I first set out to learn about snake oil, I expected to find nothing but a cautionary tale about scams and frauds. What I didn't expect was to discover a story that completely reshaped the way I think about medicine, health, and the power of perception. Because the truth is, snake oil was never just a joke. The real snake oil carried something valuable: EPA, a nutrient with profound benefits that got buried under the weight of fraudsters and cultural stigma. For me, the biggest lesson is this: sometimes what we dismiss too quickly holds the greatest potential. History branded snake oil as a scam, and for decades, that label kept people from exploring its true properties. How many other remedies have suffered the same fate? How often do we let reputation, rather than evidence, decide what we believe? This story also made me reflect on our present-day health system. It's easy to laugh at the snake oil salesman of the past, but when I look around, I see echoes of the same behavior in industries we're taught to trust. Drugs marketed as safe, only to be pulled after causing harm. Diseases discovered and defined as new markets to sell treatments. Prices inflated not by science, but by profit. In many ways, snake oil never disappeared. It just put on a more respectable face. And yet, there's a hopeful side to this too, because rediscovering the real value of snake oil shows us that truth can still surface. Science can still vindicate remedies that were unfairly dismissed. And as individuals, we have the power to look beyond the labels, to question the narratives, and to explore with curiosity rather than prejudice. Personally, this story has reminded me to be more open-minded about health, not blindly accepting every claim, but also not rejecting something just because it carries a bad reputation. It's about balance, healthy skepticism combined with genuine curiosity. If we apply that mindset not only to snake oil, but to all aspects of health, we may uncover more forgotten treasures waiting to make a difference in our lives. So, here's the takeaway I want to leave with you. Snake oil is more than a symbol of fraud. It's a symbol of how truth can be twisted, lost, and eventually rediscovered. And it's a reminder that we, as seekers of health, must always question, always learn, and always be willing to challenge the story we've been told. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think the way snake oil was dismissed has parallels in our world today? Can you think of other natural remedies that might be worth revisiting? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really enjoy hearing your perspective. And if this video gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to the Nutrition Institute. Your support helps us keep creating content that digs deeper, asks tougher questions, and uncovers the hidden truths about nutrition and health. Together, we can shine a light on the knowledge that really matters.